She threw his toolbox off the counter, 9 years of tools crashing across the concrete, and pointed one manicured finger at the door. "Don't come back." Ethan Carter didn't flinch. He knelt, gathered every wrench in silence, and walked out into the rain without a word fired for the crime of fixing a stranger's car for free. A single father, rent due in 11 days, an 8-year-old girl at home who thinks he's the strongest man alive. What neither of them knew, that cold Chicago afternoon, was that those two cruel words were about to flip his entire life upside down. Before we start, comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you still believe good men win in the end, subscribe right now. You're gonna want to see how this ends. The alarm never got to its second beep. Ethan Carter killed it in the dark, sat up, and did what he did every morning before anything else. He walked down the hall and opened Lily's door 2 inches. 8 years old. One arm thrown over a one-eared rabbit. The little star nightlight still spinning shapes across the ceiling because she was afraid of the dark. And he'd promised her the night her mother walked out that the dark would never win in this house. "Still here, kiddo," he whispered. "Still here." By 6:15, she was at the kitchen table with her hair sticking straight up on one side. "Daddy, marshmallow cereal." "That's a weekend cereal." "It's basically the weekend." "It's Tuesday." He crouched down to her level, always down to her level, so she never had to look up at him, and tapped her nose. "Spelling test today. You gonna get 'em all?" "I always get 'em all." "That's my girl. Grandma's got you at 3. I'm home by 6. What do we say?" She rolled her eyes and grinned. "No matter how hard it gets. You'll always be safe," he finished. "Every day. That's a promise." He believed it too. That was the whole thing about Ethan Carter. He kept his promises even when they cost him, especially then. 9 years he'd worked the shop on the west side. 3 bays a sign missing the O in auto, a boss who'd never once said thank you. Ethan had quietly become the best mechanic in the building, so quietly nobody noticed the day he passed them all. Customers didn't ask for the shop. They asked for Ethan. He was under a sedan by 7:10 when Dale's voice came across the floor. "Carter, Hendrick's car done. Alternators in. Test driving it after lunch." Was supposed to be yesterday. Ethan slid out on the creeper. "Part came in at 4. I stayed till 7. I don't pay overtime." "I know you don't, Dale. I stayed anyway." Dale grunted and walked off. From the next bay, a 19-year-old named Marcus leaned over the kid Ethan had been training for 6 months for free because somebody once did it for him. "How do you not deck him?" "Because I got a kid at home who needs me employed." Ethan handed him a wrench. "Come here. I'll show you how to feel a bad bearing before you ever hear it. He treats you like garbage, Ethan. You're the only reason half these people come back. Doesn't matter what a man says about you." Ethan didn't look up. "Matters what you know about yourself." The SUV rolled in a little after 2, coughing. Ethan had it diagnosed by ear before it stopped moving. The woman who stepped out did not belong on the west side. The coat cost more than he made in 2 months. Sunglasses still on under the lights. "Is there someone competent here?" "Not hello, not can you help." Marcus bristled. Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. "That'd be me, ma'am. Ethan, what's it doing?" "Shaking, on the highway. The whole dash lit up." She glanced at the peeling paint like it might give her a disease. "I ended up at a place like this. May I?" He popped the hood, leaned in. 90 seconds. "Bad coil pack. 1 cylinder's misfiring, that's your shake. You drove it hard, didn't you?" "I had a meeting." "Then you got lucky. Another few miles, that's a new engine instead of a $50 part." No judgment. Just the truth, the way a doctor tells you to quit smoking. 40 minutes and you're gone. For the first time, she actually looked at him. Really looked. And Ethan, who read people the way he read engines, saw it flicker behind the sunglasses. She'd expected to be lied to, upsold, talked down to. She hadn't expected honesty, and it threw her. 40 minutes, she repeated. 40 minutes. Fine. She wrote her name on the intake form in a hard, slanted hand, Victoria Hayes, then stood by the vending machine with her arms crossed like the floor was lava. Ethan worked. He had it done in 20. All set. Runs better than new. Your last oil change, they didn't torque the plug right, fix that too. No charge. He wiped his hands. 90 for the part 60 labor. Call it 150. She reached into her coat, then the other side. Then she stopped. He watched the color climb up her neck, watched her check the seat, the console, the floor. My wallet, I left it at the office. I don't... A woman who was clearly never caught off guard, suddenly caught completely off guard. I don't have a way to pay you right now. Dale's voice dropped from the office doorway like a wrench on concrete. Then the car stays. Ethan turned. Dale. Policy, Carter. No pay, no keys. Dale folded his arms over his belly. She can call a tow. Not my problem. But Victoria's face went cold and hard, a mask sliding right back down over the embarrassment. I will have my assistant transfer the money within the hour. I am good for it. Everybody's good for it, Dale said, till they're not. And that's the moment Ethan made the decision that cost him everything. He looked at this woman stranded in a part of town she didn't know. No money, no way home, and the same something in him that checked on a sleeping little girl every morning just would not let him do it. He put the keys in her hand. You're clear to go. Drive safe. The whole shop went silent. She stared at the keys. You'll get in trouble. Probably. Why would you do that? He shrugged like it cost him nothing, though it would cost him everything. 'Cause your car's safe now and you needed to get home. Go on, it's starting to rain. Here's where it turns, because Victoria Hayes did not say thank you. She should have. Any decent person would have. But she'd spent 20 years clawing to the top of a brutal industry, and somewhere on that climb she'd learned to trust nobody, to see an angle behind every kindness, to believe a man who gives you something free is a man setting a hook. She looked at this mechanic waving off $150, and instead of gratitude, an old suspicion curdled in her chest. Nobody does this. He knows who I am. He's working an angle. He wants something. She'd been burned before. God, had she been burned. So she did what wounded people do when the real thing finally shows up. She couldn't recognize it. She got cold. I see what this is, she said. Ma'am, the big show, the free labor, the no charge, handing me the keys like some grease-stained knight. Her voice went sharp as a blade. And I'm supposed to be so grateful I hand you my card. Remember your name. What is it you want? I don't want anything from you, Ethan said. No heat. Just tired honesty. I don't even know who you are. Everyone knows who I am. She said it before she could stop herself and hated that she'd said it. She climbed in, slammed the door, rolled the window down 2 inches, leaned into the gap, and said the 2 words that would follow him into every sleepless night to come. Don't come back, Charlotte. It made no sense. He didn't work for her. There was nothing to come back to. It was just the meanest thing her wounded pride could reach for. A door slammed in a man's face for the crime of being kind. The SUV pulled into the rain and was gone. Marcus came up beside him. What a piece of work. You gave her free labor and she... Let it go, Marcus. But she... Let it go. Ethan picked up his rag. Some people are hurting so bad the only thing they've got left to give the world is the hurt. You don't add to it. You get out of the way. He started for the bay. We got a Camry needs brakes by 5. He made it 3 steps. Carter. Dale. And this time the voice had a weight that stopped him cold. My office. Dale didn't sit down. That's how Ethan knew it wasn't a conversation. It was a sentencing. You gave that car away. I gave her the keys. She's transferring the... You don't know that. You gave away 150 of my dollars to play hero. She was stranded with no wallet in a part of town she doesn't know. What was I supposed to do, hold her car hostage? Yes. Dale's face went red. That's the policy. The policy exists, so guys like you don't give away my shop, one sob story at a time. I've never once. You do it constant. The Hendricks kid a discount. The old lady's Buick no diagnostic charge. You think I don't see it? You think you're a saint and it's my money buying your halo. Something went still and cold in Ethan's chest. 9 years. 9 years of unpaid overtime, of being the best in the building, of taking the abuse and coming back and doing it again. All of it for Lily. So what are you saying, Dale? I'm saying you're done. Clean out your box. The room didn't move. You're firing me, Ethan said slowly, for fixing a car. I'm firing you for thinking the rules don't apply to you. And this is the moment the whole story hangs on. A lesser man begs, I've got a daughter, I've got rent. 9 years, Dale, please. And every one of those things was true, and everyone screamed inside his chest. But Ethan thought about the little girl at home, about what kind of father teaches his daughter to keep her dignity right up until the second it's inconvenient, then trade it for a paycheck. He wouldn't do it. Not even here. Not even now. He picked up his toolbox, the heavy red box that held 9 years of his life, bought one wrench at a time with money he didn't have, and set it on the desk between them. Looked Dale dead in the eye. You want the truth? If that woman walked in tomorrow stranded, scared, no money, I'd do it again, every time. He lifted the box. And the fact that you can't understand why is exactly why this shop falls apart the day I walk out. Dale's mouth opened. Nothing came out. 9 years, Dale. You never once said thank you. Ethan turned for the door. Take care of yourself. Marcus knew from his face before a word was said. No, he didn't. He did. That's insane. You're the best guy here. You're the only... The kid's voice cracked. I'll quit, right now. I swear to God. You'll do no such thing. Ethan gripped his shoulder hard. You need this job. You're gonna finish the trade, you're gonna be better than me, and you're not gonna throw it away over an old man who's already got a soft landing. Promise me. It's not fair. No, it isn't. Ethan tried to smile. It didn't land. But fair's not something the world owes you, son. It's something you owe the world. You keep giving it even when you don't get it back. Especially then. He squeezed once. Promise me you'll stay. I promise. Good man. He loaded the toolbox into the bed of his 12-year-old pickup, the one he kept running out of pure stubbornness, because a new one was never in the budget. Climbed into the cab, put the key in the ignition, and just sat there. Because now came the hard part. Now he had to drive home. Walk through his own door with no job rent due in 11 days, and a daughter who thought her father was the strongest man in the world. And figure out how in God's name he was going to tell her or not tell her that the promise he'd made that very morning had just gotten a whole lot harder to keep. He gripped the wheel till his knuckles went white. 35 years old. He'd done everything right. Worked harder than anyone. Been honest when it cost him, kind when it got him nothing. And here he was in a rusted truck in the rain, fired for the one thing he'd never once been ashamed of. Yet for one moment, just one, he let his forehead drop against the wheel and let himself feel all of it. The fear, the unfairness, the bone-deep exhaustion of a good man who keeps getting punished for being good. Then he lifted his head, wiped his face with the back of one scarred hand, and did what he always did. He thought about Lily. Okay, he said out loud to nobody. Okay, we'll figure it out. We always figure it out. Bulls. The old engine caught on the second try. Of course it did. He'd built it too, and he pulled out of the lot he'd driven into every morning for 9 years, not knowing he'd never drive into it again. What he could not have known was that the cold woman in the expensive coat had not forgotten him at all. That at that very moment, 40 floors above the city, Victoria Hayes stood at a rain-streaked window, unable to shake the memory of a mechanic who'd handed over his keys and asked for nothing. And she was already reaching for her phone, already starting to ask questions. Questions that would change both their lives forever. Ethan drove home. 11 days to rent. A spelling test to ask about. A promise to keep. He kept his eyes on the road, and he did not look back. Orchestrated extended narrative void dialogue-driven pacing, the multiple turning points. Orchestrated extended narrative void dialogue-driven pacing, the multiple turning points. The rain hadn't stopped when Victoria Hayes walked into her 41st floor office, and the first thing she did was throw her keys on the desk and stare at them like they'd bitten her. Ms. Hayes. Her assistant Danielle stood in the doorway with a tablet. Your 3 o'clock is? Cancel it. You've never canceled a? Cancel it, Danielle. Bye. Danielle didn't move. 12 years she'd worked for this woman, and she'd learned to read the weather. This was new. Are you all right? A mechanic gave me my car back today. Okay. I didn't pay him. I left my wallet here. Victoria sat down slowly, still in her coat. He fixed it in 20 minutes, didn't charge me for half of it, and handed me the keys anyway, in front of his boss, who was standing right there telling him not to. Danielle waited. And I told him not to come back. The words hung in the air, and even Victoria seemed surprised to hear them out loud. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple. I thought he was working me, she said quietly. I thought nobody does that. Nobody just helps you. There's always a hook. 20 years Danielle and I have never once been wrong about that. Maybe you weren't wrong today either. He didn't even know who I am. Victoria looked up. I said everyone knows who I am, and he just nothing. Not a flicker. He genuinely didn't care. She shook her head slowly. Do you know how long it's been since I met somebody who didn't want something from me? Danielle set the tablet down. What was the shop? West Side. Prentice Auto, I think. The sign's missing a letter. Victoria's jaw tightened. Find out his name. You just said you told him not to come back. I know what I said. She turned to the window to the gray city, bleeding rain 40 floors below. Find out his name anyway. That was the first crack in Victoria Hayes. She didn't know it yet, but it was the beginning of the end of the woman she'd been for 20 years. Across the city, that same woman's target was standing outside his daughter's school, with his hands jammed in his pockets, trying to look like a man who still had a job. Yay. Lily came running out at the bell, backpack bouncing, and Ethan crouched down to catch her the way he always did. Daddy, I got 100 on the spelling test. 100. He pulled her in. Every single one. Every single one. Even rhythm. Nobody else got rhythm. That's my girl. He held her a half-second longer than usual, and she felt it. Daddy, you're squishing me. Sorry. He let go, smiling. Grandma couldn't get you, so you got stuck with me. That okay. You're better than Grandma. Grandma makes me hold her hand at the crosswalk. I'm gonna make you hold my hand at the crosswalk. Yeah, but you're cool about it. He laughed, and for 1 second the weight lifted off his chest, and he almost forgot. Then they got to the truck, and he saw his toolbox sitting in the bed where he'd thrown it, and the whole afternoon came crashing back. 11 days to rent, and now no way to make it. Menu that night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a shoebox full of bills and did the math 3 times, hoping it would come out different. It didn't. He had $400 in checking. Rent was $1,100. The electric was $90. Lily needed new shoes. She'd been quiet about the hole in the left one, because she was the kind of kid who noticed when her dad was stretched thin and tried to make herself small. That last thought was the one that got him. Not the rent, not the electric. The idea that his 8-year-old was already learning to hide what she needed to protect him. He put his face in his hands. "No," he said out loud to the empty kitchen. "That's not how this goes." He picked up his phone and started making a list. Every shop in a 15-mile radius. He'd start calling at 7 a.m. He was the best mechanic on the west side. Somebody would hire him by the end of the week. Somebody had to. He believed that when he went to bed. He believed it a little less at noon the next day after the fourth shop turned him down. "Sorry, man, we're full up." "Wish I could. Budget's tight." "You worked at Prentice." "Yeah, Dale called around. Said you were a liability. Gave away inventory." A pause. "Look, I don't know you, and I got Dale calling me a friend of 20 years, so..." Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Dale had called around. Dale, who was so cheap he counted the shop rags, had spent his own time poisoning the well, making sure the best mechanic he'd ever fired couldn't land anywhere else. Out of what spite? Nothing but spite. Ethan stood in the parking lot of a Home Depot where he'd been circling job postings, and for a moment the anger was so pure and so hot it scared him. He wanted to drive back to that shop and put his fist through the office wall. Instead, he took a breath. And another. And he thought about who he'd be if he did that. A man with a broken hand and a court date and a daughter watching the news. He got in the truck. He kept driving. There were 9 more shops on the list. Meanwhile, Danielle set a single sheet of paper on Victoria's desk. "His name is Ethan Carter." Victoria looked up. 35, single father. 1 daughter, 8 years old. Wife left about 5 years ago, no contact since. He's been at Prentice Auto for 9 years. Danielle paused. "He was fired yesterday afternoon." Victoria went very still. "Fired? The day you were there. Word is the owner canned him for giving away a repair." Danielle's voice was carefully neutral. "Yours, I'd assume." The silence in the office stretched long enough to become its own answer. "He got fired," Victoria said slowly, "for helping me." "Looks that way." Victoria stood up and walked to the window, and this time she didn't say anything for a long, long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller almost. "I want everything, Danielle, not just the file. I want to know who this man is. Talk to people. Customers, the kid who worked with him, whoever you can find." She turned around. "I told a man not to come back, and it turns out he lost his whole livelihood because he did the right thing for me. I need to understand who does that. And when I find out, then I'll know what I'm dealing with." That night, Ethan tucked Lily in, and she caught his wrist as he stood up. "Daddy, is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. You've been doing the smile." "What smile?" "The one you do when something's wrong, but you don't want me to know." She looked up at him with those serious eyes. "You did it at dinner." Ethan sat back down on the edge of the bed. He'd promised himself he'd never lie to her, that whatever else the world took from him, he'd give her the truth in doses she could carry. But he'd also promised she'd always feel safe. And sometimes those two promises pulled in opposite directions, and he had to figure out where the line was. "I lost my job, baby," he said gently, "at the shop." Her eyes went wide. "Why, you're the best. Everybody says you're the best. Sometimes being the best isn't the thing that keeps a job." He tucked the blanket in around her. "I did something my boss didn't like. I helped somebody who needed helping even though the rules said I shouldn't. And he got mad. That's not fair. No, it isn't." He smiled, the real one this time. "But here's the thing you gotta know. I'd do it again. And I need you to understand why, because it's important." He took her small hand. "There are gonna be times in your life when doing the right thing costs you something. And in those times, a lot of people are gonna tell you to just follow the rules. Keep your head down, protect yourself. And sometimes that's smart. But sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same thing. And when that happens, you do the right thing. You hear me? Even when it costs you." Even when it cost you, she repeated. That's my girl. But Daddy, what about money? Grandma says we don't have a lot. And there it was, 8 years old and already carrying it. You let me worry about money, he said firmly. That's my job. Your job is spelling tests and being a kid. We got a deal. We got a deal. She was quiet a second. Daddy. Yeah. We're still safe, right? Like you promised.
네, 차마 아unty.
He looked at her. This kid who'd noticed the hole in her shoe and said nothing, who'd noticed the smile and said everything, and he made a decision right there that he would sell the truck, sell the tools, work 3 jobs, do whatever it took before he'd ever make that promise a lie. We're still safe, he said. That's a promise. And I don't break promises to you. Not ever. She smiled and closed her eyes, and within a minute she was asleep, trusting him completely, the way only a child can. Ethan sat there in the dark for a long time. 2 days later, the phone calls stopped even getting answered. Dale had done his work well. Ethan had put in applications at a warehouse, a delivery company, anywhere that would take a man who could work with his hands. He was 3 weeks from a place he'd never been in his adult life, genuinely not knowing how he'd make rent, and he was starting to feel the floor tilt. And that same morning, 40 floors up, Victoria Hayes was getting an education. Danielle had spent 2 days on it, and she came back with a folder and a strange look on her face. I've done background checks on executives, she said, sitting down across from Victoria. CEOs. People we've acquired companies from. I have never in my career had one come back like this. Like what? Like there's nothing bad in it. Danielle opened the folder. I talked to 11 people, customers mostly. The word they keep using is honest. One woman, a widow, said her car broke down 3 years ago and she couldn't afford the repair. Ethan fixed it on a Sunday, his day off, wouldn't take a dime, told her to pay him back by helping somebody else someday. Victoria said nothing. There's a single mother, he kept a 15-year-old Honda running for way past when it should have died because she couldn't afford another car and she needed it to get to work. He'd charge her for parts and eat the labor. For years. Danielle turned a page. There's a kid 19 works at the shop. Marcus. I talked to him. He cried Victoria. This kid cried talking about Ethan. Said Ethan taught him everything for free on his own time. And when the boss fired Ethan, the kid tried to quit in protest and Ethan wouldn't let him. Told him to stay and finish learning the trade. Stop, Victoria said. Danielle looked up. I said not to come back. Victoria's voice cracked just slightly, and she seemed almost bewildered by it. He fixed my car when I couldn't pay. He lost his job for it, and I looked him in the eye and told him not to come back like he was. Like he was nothing. She pressed her hand flat against the desk. I was so sure. I was so sure he was working me. 20 years I built a wall so nobody could get past me. And the one time a genuinely good man walks through my door, She stopped. Danielle had never seen her like this. There's one more thing, Danielle said carefully. The shop. Prentice Auto. I had someone drive by yesterday. And it's falling apart. 3 customers canceled appointments the day after Ethan left because they only came for him. The kid Marcus, he's good, but he's 19. He can't carry the whole shop. 2 other mechanics gave notice this week. Word's getting around the neighborhood about why Ethan got fired, and people are furious. They loved him, Victoria. That whole side of town loved that man, and Dale Prentice just handed him a pink slip for being the best thing that ever happened to his business. Victoria stared at the folder for a long moment. Where is Ethan Carter right now? He's applying for warehouse jobs. Nobody in the trade will hire him. Prentice called around, badmouthed him. He's got a kid to feed, and he's running out of options. Danielle closed the folder. Victoria, I don't say this often, but that man is drowning, and it's partly because of us. Partly. Victoria let out a short, hard breath. It's because of me. The rest is Dale Prentice, and I'll get to him. She stood up and something in her had changed. The CEO was back, but sharper now, aimed at something. I want to meet him. Ethan. Not at the shop. Somewhere neutral. And Danielle. Yes. Don't tell him who I am. Not yet. I don't want him saying yes to anything because of what I can do for him. I want to talk to the man first. That afternoon, Ethan's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, and he almost didn't answer it because unknown numbers lately meant collections. Ethan Carter. Speaking. My name's Danielle. I'm calling on behalf of someone who'd like to meet with you. There's a diner on Racine the Blue Star. Tomorrow 10 a.m. Coffee's on us. Ethan frowned. Who's the someone? Someone whose car you fixed recently. The line went quiet on his end. He knew immediately who it was. There was only one car he'd fixed recently that came attached to this kind of phone call. Tell her, Ethan said slowly, that I already heard everything I need to hear from her. She was pretty clear. She knows what she said. That's exactly why she wants to see you. A pause. Mr. Carter, I've worked for this woman a long time, and I've never once heard her ask to apologize to anyone. I'm asking you to give her the chance. Ethan looked across the kitchen, where Lily's spelling test, with the big red 100, was stuck to the fridge with a magnet. He thought about the $400 in checking. He thought about pride, and how pride doesn't buy shoes. 10 a.m., he said. But I'm not looking for a handout. She should know that going in. I'll tell her. Thank you, Mr. Carter. He hung up and stood there a long moment, and he had no idea, none, that he'd just agreed to the meeting that would change the entire direction of his life. The next morning, Victoria arrived at the Blue Star 20 minutes early, which was not like her, and sat in a booth facing the door, which was also not like her. She'd traded the $2,000 coat for something plain. She didn't want the armor today. She wanted to be a person across a table from a person. Ethan walked in at 9:58, and she recognized him instantly. The same steady walk, the same scarred hands, the same look of a man who'd made peace with hard things. He spotted her and came over, but he didn't sit right away. Before I sit down, Ethan said, I want to be straight with you. I don't want anything from you. I came because a woman on the phone said you wanted to say something to me, and I was raised to give people the chance to say their piece. But if this is about money or guilt, or you trying to feel better about something, I'll drink a cup of coffee and go. No hard feelings. Victoria looked up at him, and to her own shock, her eyes were stinging. Sit down, Mr. Carter, she said quietly. Please. And let me say the thing I came to say because I've never said it to anyone, and I might lose the nerve. He sat. I was wrong, Victoria said. About you. Completely humiliatingly wrong. You did something kind, and I was so certain that kindness was a trick that I threw it back in your face. And then I found out you lost your job for it, your livelihood. You've got a daughter, and you can't get hired anywhere because the man who fired you is out there poisoning your name and all of that. All of it traces back to one afternoon when you did the decent thing for a stranger who didn't deserve it. Her voice was steady now, but her hands weren't. I have spent 2 days learning who you are, Mr. Carter, and I am ashamed of who I was standing in that shop. I'm sorry. I am so deeply sorry. Ethan was quiet for a while. He turned his coffee cup a slow quarter turn on the table. I appreciate that, he finally said. I do. Not a lot of people can say those words and mean them, and I can hear that you mean them. He looked up. But I gotta ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. Why'd you do it? Not the sorry. The other thing, in the shop. Why was your first instinct to think I was working an angle? Yay. And that question asked, without any anger, just an honest man honestly wanting to understand, did something to Victoria Hayes that no boardroom had done in 20 years. Because I've been running a company since I was 30, she said. And when you're a woman in my position, everyone wants something. Every kind word has an invoice attached. Every favor is a down payment on a bigger ask. I learned to see the hook before I felt the bait, because the times I didn't, it cost me money control once, nearly the whole company. She swallowed. So I built a wall, and I told myself the wall was wisdom. And it worked for the most part. Until I walked into a garage on the west side, and a man handed me my keys and asked for nothing, and I couldn't. I literally could not process it. It didn't fit anything I knew about people, so I decided it had to be a trick. Because the alternative meant my wall had been keeping out the good, along with the bad all these years. She let out a shaky breath. And I don't think I was ready to know that. Ethan nodded slowly. He understood more than she expected him to. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "My wife left 5 years ago. Just gone. No note that made sense, no forwarding address, nothing. Left me with a 3-year-old and a mountain of why. And for about a year, I was where you are. I looked at everybody like they were about to leave or lie or take something. I got hard, and you know who pulled me out of it?" "Who?" "My daughter. Because a kid doesn't have a wall. A kid just loves you wide open, no protection, and dares you to do the same. And one day, I realized I could either keep my wall and teach her to build one too, or I could tear it down and show her that trusting people is worth the risk of getting hurt." He turned the cup another quarter turn. "I tore it down. Best decision I ever made. And it's the reason I fixed your car, and it's the reason I'd do it again, and it's the reason I don't hold what you said against you. Because I remember being where you're sitting. It's a cold place to live." Victoria Hayes had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. She had fired executives twice her age and never lost sleep. And she sat in a vinyl booth in a diner on Racine and had to look at the ceiling to keep the tears from falling. Because this man she had discarded like nothing, had just seen straight through her armor to the frightened, lonely person she'd been hiding for 2 decades. And instead of using it against her, he'd offered her a way out. "You are," she said when she trusted her voice, "not what I expected." "I get that a lot." She laughed, wet and surprised. Then she straightened, and something shifted in her posture, and Ethan felt the air in the booth change. "Mr. Carter, I haven't been completely honest with you, and I need to fix that before we go one word further." She folded her hands. "I let you believe I'm just a customer. I'm not. My name is Victoria Hayes, and I'm the CEO of Hayes Mobility Group." Ethan blinked. "I don't—" "You wouldn't. We're not a consumer brand. But if you've ever seen a training certificate on a mechanic's wall, driven past a technical academy, or dealt with a certified apprentice program, anywhere in this country, there's a real chance we built it. We train the people who fix America's cars. Tens of thousands of them. We run apprenticeships in 31 states. She held his eyes. "I don't fix cars, Mr. Carter. I build the people who do. And I have spent 2 days learning that you are, quietly, one of the best of them. Not because of your hands, though. I hear those are extraordinary too, but because of what you teach the young people around you without being asked, and what you refuse to compromise, even when it costs you everything." Ethan set down his coffee cup very carefully. "I didn't come here for a job," he said, and there was an edge of something almost like fear in it, the fear of a drowning man being shown a rope he's afraid to believe is real. "I know you didn't. That's precisely why I'm about to offer you one." Victoria leaned forward. "But I'm not going to say it all today. Because if I lay it out now, you'll say yes for the wrong reasons, because you're scared, because rent's due, because a rich woman is dangling a lifeline. And I don't want that. I want you to say yes because you believe in the thing I'm building. So I'm going to ask you to do one thing first." "What's that?" "Come see it. Tomorrow. Let me show you a training floor. Let me show you the kids we're teaching and the way we're teaching them. And let me show you everything that's wrong with it. Everything I know is wrong with it. And can't fix. Because I've never once had grease under my fingernails. And you've had it under yours for 20 years. She stood and set a card on the table. "Then you decide. No pressure. No guilt. Just come look." Ethan stared at the card. His whole body was telling him this was too good, that things this good don't happen to men like him, that there was a catch he just couldn't see yet. But then he thought about the widow, whose car he fixed on a Sunday, and the single mom's 15-year-old Honda, and Marcus crying being told to stay. He thought about all the times he'd done the right thing into a void expecting nothing back, and here for the first time in his life was the void answering. "I'll come look," he said. "That's all I'm promising. I'll come look. That's all I'm asking." She walked to the door, and then she stopped and turned back. "Mr. Carter, the widow, on the Sunday, the one you fixed the car for and told to pay it back by helping someone else." Victoria's voice was soft. "Her name is Eleanor Ruiz. She's the one who told me about you first. And when I asked her why she was still crying about a car repair from 3 years ago, do you know what she said?" Ethan shook his head. "She said because I'd stopped believing there were still men like that. And then there was one." Victoria pulled her coat tighter. "There are a lot of us who stopped believing that. I was one of them. 10 o'clock tomorrow. I'll send a car. Guys." And then she was gone out into the gray morning, leaving Ethan Carter alone in a diner booth with a business card, a cold cup of coffee, and the dizzying, terrifying, impossible feeling that the worst week of his life might have just cracked open into something he didn't have a name for yet. He picked up the card, turned it over in his scarred fingers. Victoria Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Hayes Mobility Group. He thought about Lily asleep that morning with her rabbit and the promise he'd made that she'd always be safe. For the first time in 11 days, he let himself believe he might be able to keep it. He put the card in his shirt pocket right over his heart and went home to tell his daughter that tomorrow her daddy had somewhere important to be. The car Victoria sent was black and quiet, and Ethan sat in the back of it in his cleanest shirt, feeling like a man wearing a costume of himself. He'd dropped Lily at school an hour early, told her grandma would get her, and when she'd asked where he was going, he'd said, "To look at something. Might be nothing. Might be everything." She'd studied his face and said, "You're not doing the smile," and he'd laughed and said, "No, baby, not today." Now the city slid by the window, and he kept his hand pressed flat against his shirt pocket, where the business card still sat over his heart, and he told himself the same thing he'd been telling himself since 10 o'clock the night before. Don't get your hopes up. Men like you don't get rescued. You go, you look, you keep your dignity, and if it's real, and if it's a mirage, you walk away clean. The building when the car pulled up was enormous. Glass and steel, 4 stories, a logo he'd driven past 100 times and never once registered. Hayes Mobility Group. Danielle met him at the door. "He's nervous," she said into her phone, and then catching herself, "Sorry, she wanted a heads up." She pocketed the phone. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. She's on the training floor." The training floor. You'll see. They took an elevator down, not up, and when the doors opened, Ethan stopped walking. It was a garage, but not like any garage he'd ever stood in. 40 bays gleaming, every tool laid out, diagnostic equipment worth more than his house, and young people everywhere. Dozens of them in matching coveralls, heads under hoods. And it hit him in the chest like a fist because it was him. Every one of them was him 15 years ago, hungry and eager, and just wanting somebody to show them how. Victoria was standing in the middle of it, and when she saw his face, she didn't say hello. She just said, "Now you understand why I couldn't explain it in a diner." "How many?" Ethan asked. "On this floor, 60. Across the country this year, a little over 11,000. She walked toward him. "We are the largest technical training company in the nation. We put more certified mechanics into the workforce than anyone alive. And I'm going to tell you a secret I've never said out loud to anyone in this building." She stopped in front of him. "It's broken. And I've known it's broken for 3 years, and I haven't been able to fix it because I don't know what's wrong. And I think you'll see it in about 90 seconds. She was right. It took him less than that. Ethan walked slowly down the row of bays, and his mechanic's eye, the eye that could hear a bad bearing before it sang, started picking it up immediately. He stopped behind a kid, maybe 20, who was torquing a bolt. "What's your name?" The kid looked up, startled. Tyler?" "Tyler, what are you doing there?" "Torquing to spec, 45 foot-pounds. It's on the sheet." "It's on the sheet," Ethan repeated. Whose car is this? Tyler blinked. Nobody's. It's a training block. Right. So let me ask you something. This customer, the one who's gonna own this car someday, she got 3 kids and a job 40 minutes away and no money for a tow. If this bolt's wrong, what happens to her? Tyler stared. It's torqued to spec, so that's not what I asked. I asked what happens to her. Ethan crouched by the wheel. You're learning the number. 45 foot-pounds. Good number. But nobody's told you the number is a person. Nobody's told you that behind every one of these bolts is somebody's mom trying to get to work, somebody's kid in the back seat. Somebody's whole day riding on whether you gave a damn or just hit the number on the sheet. He stood up. That's the thing that makes a mechanic, not the torque wrench. The knowing who's in the car. Tyler was quiet, then softly. Nobody's ever said it like that. I know, Ethan said. That's the problem. And when he turned around, Victoria Hayes was standing 10 feet back with her hand pressed over her mouth and Danielle beside her with wide eyes, because in 90 seconds, a fired mechanic from the West Side had diagnosed the thing a $100 million company hadn't been able to name in 3 years. That, Victoria said, lowering her hand. That's what's missing. We teach them the skill. We never teach them the why. We build technicians, and we forget to build people who care, Ethan finished. You can't teach a torque spec to care, but you can teach a person to. It just takes somebody who does it standing in front of them every day, showing them it's real. He looked around the floor at all those young faces. These kids aren't broken. Your curriculum's not even broken mostly. You're just missing the thing that can't go on a worksheet. Victoria walked over to him slowly. Come to my office, she said. It's time I told you the whole thing. Her office was on the 4th floor, all glass, the whole gray city laid out below, and Ethan stood at the window with his hands in his pockets while Victoria poured 2 coffees and set one beside him. When I was 19, she said, I worked the counter at a transmission shop. My father's. He was a mechanic, a great one, the kind people drove 2 towns over to see. And he died when I was 22, and the shop died with him, because he'd never taught anyone what he knew. It all went into the ground with him. She sat on the edge of her desk. I built this company so that would never happen again. So the knowledge in men like my father and men like you wouldn't die every time one of them retired or passed. That was the dream. She looked into her coffee. And somewhere in 20 years of scaling it and funding it and selling the board on it, I turned my father's heart into a worksheet. I built a machine that manufactures the skill and loses the soul, and I've known it. I've watched our graduates go out and become exactly the kind of mechanic my father hated, the kind who hits the number and doesn't see the person. And I didn't know how to fix it until yesterday, in a diner, when you told me a torque spec is a person. Ethan turned from this window. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want to offer you a job, and I want you to understand it's not charity. She stood up. I want you to design a program, a real one, not a module we bolt onto the curriculum, a whole philosophy built from the floor up that teaches these kids the thing you taught Tyler in 90 seconds. I want you to build the academy my father would have built if he'd ever thought bigger than one shop, and I want you to run it. She held his eyes. Director of Training Integrity. That's the title. 6 figures. Full benefits, the kind that means your daughter never sits in a waiting room wondering if you can afford the doctor. And a mission that means every young person who comes through this company for the next 30 years learns to see the person in the car.
Gentlemen.
The number she'd said, 6 figures, hung in the air, and Ethan had to reach out and put his hand on the back of a chair because 11 days ago he'd been doing math on a shoebox of bills, and the room tilted a little. I need to be honest with you about something, he said, and his voice wasn't quite steady. Yesterday, I had $400 in my checking account. Rent's $1,100, and it's due in 9 days. I've got a hole in my daughter's shoe I've been pretending I don't see. So when you say that number, part of me wants to grab your hand and say yes before you change your mind. He swallowed. And that's exactly why I can't say yes yet. Because I promised myself a long time ago I'd never make a decision out of fear. And I don't know if I'm saying yes to the mission or yes to not being scared anymore. And those aren't the same thing. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and something like respect, deep, genuine respect, settled over her face. You know, she said quietly, I've offered a lot of people a lot of money in this office. You're the first one who ever hesitated because it was too much of a rescue. She set down her coffee. Take the weekend. Talk to your daughter. And Monday tell me if you believe in it. Not if you need it. If you believe in it. Ethan nodded. And he might have left it there, taken the weekend, gone home to think. Except that's when the door opened without a knock, and Danielle stepped in with a look on her face that stopped both of them cold. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. But Victoria, you need to see this. It's about the Prentice shop. What about it? It's not just falling apart, it's collapsing. Danielle set her tablet on the desk. The two mechanics who gave notice, they walked out this morning, didn't finish the week, and they took the shop's biggest account with them, the Hendricks family, the ones with the fleet of delivery vans. 14 vehicles. That account was almost half of Prentice's revenue. And here's the part you'll want to hear. She looked at Ethan. The Hendricks family didn't leave because of the two mechanics. They left because they found out what Dale did to you. Mrs. Hendricks called it, and I'm quoting, the last straw with a man who never deserved his best employee. Ethan sat down slowly in the chair he'd been gripping. He's finished, Danielle went on. I've seen the numbers. A contact of ours does his books. Prentice Auto has maybe 6 weeks before it can't make payroll, and Dale knows it, which is probably why she hesitated. Mr. Carter, has Dale tried to contact you in the last day or two? Ethan pulled out his phone, and his face changed. I had it off for the meeting yesterday. I didn't check. He looked at the screen. 4 missed calls. From the shop. He looked up. From Dale. The room went quiet. He wants you back, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. He wants me back. Ethan agreed slowly, and there was something almost dazed in it. 9 days ago, this man had thrown his tools and fired him for kindness, called every shop in the city to make sure he'd never work again. And now the empire of spite was cracking, and Dale Prentice was drowning in the wreckage of his own cruelty, reaching for the very hand he'd slapped away. Are you going to call him back? Victoria asked. Bapue. And that question, simple as it was, cracked the whole thing wide open, because Ethan Carter, who had spent his entire adult life with no power at all, who had been fired and blackballed and left with $400 and a hole in his daughter's shoe, suddenly realized he was holding something he'd never held before. He had a choice. For the first time in years, he held the power, not the men who'd always held it over him. I don't know, he said honestly. Part of me wants to hear him grovel. I won't lie about that. 9 years I never once heard that man say thank you, and now he's calling me 4 times in a day. He turned the phone over in his hand. But I've got a daughter who watches everything I do, and I don't want her to grow up thinking the point of getting power is to make the people who hurt you feel small. That's building the same wall you built Victoria, just from the other side. Victoria said nothing because there was nothing to say to that. I'm going to call him, Ethan decided, but not to gloat and not to go back. I need to hear what a man says when the thing he built on being cruel finally comes down on his head. I need to know if he learned anything. Because if he did, that means people can change. He looked at her. And I really, really need to believe people can change right now. Do it here, Victoria said. Put it on speaker if you want to witness, or we'll step out. Stay, Ethan said. Both of you. I don't have anything to hide. He pressed the call button and put it on speaker, and it rang twice before Dale's voice came through, and it was a voice Ethan had never once heard from the man in 9 years, small and shaking and afraid. Ethan, thank God. I've been calling. Listen, A breath. I need you to come back. I'll double your pay. I'll give you a title. Whatever you want. The shop's things have gotten bad, real bad, and I know we had our differences, but you and me, we go back 9 years and... 9 years, Ethan said quietly. You remembered that today. Silence on the line. You know. Ethan went on, and his voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't warm either. It was just true. The day you fired me, I told you that shop would fall apart the day I walked out. You want to know why I knew that it wasn't ego, Dale? It's because I was never the thing that held that shop together. The customers held it together. The people I helped on Sundays, the old lady with the Buick, the Hendricks family, and every one of them stayed because they knew somebody in that building gave a damn about them. And the day you fired me for giving a damn, you told all of them exactly what you thought of the thing that kept them coming back. Ethan, please. Dale's voice broke. I got a mortgage. I got the bank's gonna... And here was the moment. Here was where a smaller man would have said, good, you reap what you sow, and hung up and felt justified. And Ethan felt the pull of it, felt how good it would feel, how earned. Dale, he said instead, I'm not coming back. I want you to hear that clearly because it's final. But I'm going to tell you the one thing that might save you. And I'm telling you for free, same as I've always done things, because apparently I can't help myself. He leaned toward the phone. Call the Hendricks family, not your assistant you, and don't offer them a discount. Apologize. Tell them you were wrong about me, and you're sorry it took losing everything to see it. Then find that kid, Marcus, and promote him and pay him what he's worth, and let him teach the young guys the way I taught him, because that boy is the best thing left in your building, and if you're too proud to see it, you deserve to lose the shop. He paused. That's the last free repair you'll ever get from me, Dale. Use it or don't. And he hung up. The office was silent. Danielle was staring at him. And Victoria Hayes, CEO of a company that trained 11,000 mechanics a year, was looking at Ethan Carter like she'd just watched something she'd waited her whole life to see. You just gave the man who destroyed your life a map to save his, she said slowly. Why? Ethan set the phone down. Because my daughter asked me a question the other night, he said. She asked if we were still safe, and I've been thinking about what safe even means. And I don't think it means having money or a good job, or getting even with the people who hurt you. He looked out the window at the gray city. I think it means being a person you don't have to hide from your own kid. I think it means she can watch every single thing I do and never once see me become somebody small. He turned back. If I'd hung up on Dale gloating, I'd have won. But Lily would have lost a little piece of the dad she thinks I am, and she's worth more than that. She's worth more than everything. Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice had changed, the CEO edge gone something rawer underneath. My father used to say something, she said. I'd forgotten it until right now. He said, the measure of a man isn't what he does when the world's watching. It's what he does when the only person watching is somebody who loves him. Her eyes were shining. I built a company to keep men like my father alive. And I think I just found the man who's going to teach 11,000 kids a year to be him. She walked around the desk and stood in front of Ethan and put out her hand. Not the cold, transactional handshake of the boardroom, but something else, something that meant it. I'm not going to make you wait until Monday, she said. But I'm not going to rush you either. So I'll say it plain. The offer stands on the table, no expiration. Take the weekend. Take a month. Take whatever you need. But Ethan, I don't want you because you need rescuing. I stopped needing you to need me the second I watched you talk to Tyler. I want you because you are the best teacher I have ever seen, and you don't even know it yet. Ethan looked at her outstretched hand, and he thought about Lily's shoe, and the $400, and the widow on the Sunday, and Marcus crying, and the 9 years of no one ever saying thank you, and a woman who'd told him don't come back now, offering him the chance to build something that would outlive them both. He didn't take the hand yet, but he didn't walk away either. I need to talk to my daughter, he said. Before I decide anything this big, she gets a say. That's how we do things, her and me. We're a team. That, Victoria said, lowering her hand with a small smile, might be the most reassuring thing you've said all day. He rode home in the quiet black car, and the whole way he kept his hand pressed over the business card in his shirt pocket, and for the first time in 9 days, the thing in his chest wasn't fear. It was something he'd almost forgotten the shape of. And when Lily came running out of school at the bell, backpack bouncing, and threw herself into his arms, he held her tight and said, "How do you feel about your daddy having a very important, very grown-up conversation with you tonight, man to kid?" She pulled back and looked at him with those serious eyes. And then she smiled, because his face wasn't doing the smile. "Daddy," she said, "you're doing the real one." And he laughed and swung her up into the truck and drove them home to talk about the thing that was going to change both their lives, not knowing yet just how far it would take them or how many people were about to be watching. That night, Ethan made grilled cheese, the good kind with 2 cheeses the way Lily liked it for special occasions. And when he set the plate in front of her, she narrowed her eyes because grilled cheese on a Thursday meant something was up. "Okay," she said, folding her hands like a tiny businesswoman. "What is it?" He laughed. "You're 8. How are you already this smart? Grandma says I get it from you. Mom says I got it from—" She stopped. She rarely mentioned her mother, and when she did, she watched his face carefully to see if it hurt him. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry, baby. You can talk about her whenever you want." He sat down across from her. "But that's actually a little bit what I want to talk to you about. About us. About the future." He took a breath. "You remember, I lost my job at the shop." She nodded, chewing. "Well, something happened. That lady whose car I fixed, the one who was so mean to me, turns out she runs a very big company. A company that teaches thousands of young people how to be mechanics all over the country. And she came and found me, and she said she was sorry for how she treated me. And then she offered me a job." Lily stopped chewing. "A good job, a really good job. The kind where—" His voice caught and he had to steady it. "The kind where I could buy you new shoes, baby, without doing the math 3 times. Lily looked down at her sneaker, the one with the hole she'd never mentioned, and her cheeks went pink. "You knew about that. I know everything about you. It's my whole job." He reached across and took her hand. "But here's the thing, Lily. This job, it's a big one. It might mean I'm busier sometimes. It might mean we have to change some things. And it's such a big decision that I didn't want to make it without asking you. Because you and me—" "We're a team," she finished. "We're a team, so I'm asking my teammate. What do you think?" "Duh." And Lily, 8 years old, did a thing that stopped his heart. She got very serious the way she did before a spelling test, and she said, "Do you like her? The lady?" Ethan blinked. That's not really— Not like that." Lily rolled her eyes. "I mean, is she good now? She was mean to you. Is she good now, or is she still mean and just pretending?" And there it was. The exact question Ethan himself had been circling for 2 days, asked plainly by a child who cut straight to the bone of it. He sat back. "I think," he said slowly, "she was a person who got hurt a long time ago and built a wall so nobody could hurt her again. And I think the wall made her act mean even when she didn't want to be. And I think she's trying to take the wall down. And that's hard, Lily. That's really hard for grown-ups. Taking down a wall you spent 20 years building." He squeezed her hand. "So I don't think she's pretending. I think she's trying. And I think trying counts for a lot." Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then she nodded once. "Then you should take the job," she said, "because you're the best mechanic in the whole world, and if she teaches people, then you should teach people, because you taught me to ride my bike, and you were really patient, and you didn't even yell when I ran into the Hendersons' trash cans." Ethan laughed so hard his eyes stung. "That's your reasoning. The trash cans." "You didn't yell," Lily said solemnly. "Most dads would have yelled." And that was it. That was the whole decision made across a plate of grilled cheese by an 8-year-old who measured a man's worth by whether he yelled about trash cans. Ethan got up, came around the table, and hugged his daughter so tight she squeaked. "Okay," he whispered into her hair. "Okay, we'll do it. Together." "Together," she agreed, muffled against his shoulder. Then, "Daddy, you're squishing me again." Monday morning, Ethan walked into Hayes' mobility group in his cleanest shirt, and this time he didn't feel like a man in a costume. He felt like a man walking toward something. Victoria was waiting in the lobby, which her assistant later told him she had never once done for anyone, and when she saw his face, she knew before he said a word. "She said yes, didn't she?" Victoria said. "Your daughter." "She said yes." Ethan smiled. "On the condition that I don't yell. It's a long story. I look forward to hearing it." And then Victoria Hayes did something that made Danielle, watching from across the lobby, actually gasp. She stuck out her hand, and when Ethan shook it, she put her other hand over the top of it, and her eyes were wet. "Welcome to the company, Mr. Carter. You have no idea what you're about to build." "Neither do you," Ethan said. "That's the fun part." The first 90 days nearly broke him.
Ante.
Because here's the thing. Nobody tells you about being handed your dream. It doesn't come easy just because it came at last. Ethan Carter had spent 9 years as the best pair of hands in a 3-bay shop, and now he was standing in front of a whiteboard in a conference room full of curriculum designers with graduate degrees, people who'd been building training programs since before he'd changed his first oil filter, and every one of them was looking at him like they were waiting for the fired mechanic to prove he belonged in the room. The first meeting was a disaster. "With respect," said a man named Gerald, who ran instructional design and had the tight smile of someone protecting his territory. "We've spent 4 years refining this curriculum against measurable competency outcomes. What you're describing, teaching them to care, isn't measurable. You can't put it on an assessment. You can't report it to the accreditation board. It's a nice sentiment, but it's not a program." And every head in the room turned to Ethan, the outsider, the charity hire, the man who'd never sat in a meeting like this in his life. Ethan was quiet for a second. Then he stood up and walked to the whiteboard. "Gerald, how many of your graduates are still working as mechanics 5 years out?" Gerald blinked. We track first-year placement, which is at 91%. "That's not what I asked. First year. How many are still turning wrenches 5 years later?" A pause. "We don't. That data's harder to. It's about 40%. Ethan looked around the room. "I looked it up, 40%, which means 60% of the kids you train quit the trade inside 5 years. You're the best in the country at getting them the skill and the certificate, and more than half of them walk away anyway. You want to know why?" He tapped the whiteboard. "Because nobody ever gave them a reason. You taught them how. You never taught them why. And when the work gets hard, and it always gets hard, why is the only thing that keeps a person's hands in the engine. A skill without a reason is just a job. A skill with a reason is a calling. And callings don't quit at 40%. Boomai. Jane. The room was silent. Gerald's tight smile had faded. "You can measure it, by the way," Ethan went on. "You track retention. 5-year tenure. You track how many of them come back and teach the next group. You track how many of their customers come back. Because a mechanic who cares keeps his customers, and I can show you the numbers on that from a 3-bay shop on the west side. Care isn't soft, Gerald. Care is the most measurable thing there is. It just takes longer than a first-year placement report." And that was the moment the room turned. Ethan could feel it, the shift, the way a stubborn bolt finally gives. Gerald leaned back, and after a long moment he said quietly, 40%. You're sure about that number?" "I'm sure. That's been bothering me for 3 years, and I never once framed it that way." Gerald picked up a pen. "Okay, show me how you'd build it. How you'd build."
맞아.
By the end of that meeting, the man who'd tried to shut Ethan down was filling a whiteboard beside him. And Victoria, watching through the glass wall, murmured to Danielle, "He just turned my most territorial director into a disciple in 40 minutes. My father couldn't have done that." But the real test wasn't the conference room. It was the floor. Ethan insisted on it. He wouldn't design a program from behind a desk. He told Victoria he needed to teach a pilot group himself, hands-on, so the curriculum came from what actually worked, and not from what sounded good on a slide. So they gave him 12 students, the 12 notably that other instructors had flagged as most likely to drop out. The angry ones, the distracted ones, the ones with too much life happening outside the garage to focus inside it. Victoria worried privately that it was a mistake, that handing Ethan the hardest 12 would sink the whole pilot and give the skeptics ammunition. She didn't understand yet that the hardest 12 were exactly the kids Ethan had spent his whole life becoming the right man for. There was a kid named Andre, 19, who showed up late every day with his hood up and his headphones in and an attitude that dared anyone to try. 3 instructors had written him off. On the 4th day, Ethan pulled him aside, not to lecture him, just to talk. "You're good," Ethan said. "You know that your hands are good. Better than half the kids in here who show up on time." Andre looked at him sideways, waiting for the catch. "So I gotta ask, somebody with hands like yours, why do you show up every day acting like you don't want to be here?" Andre's jaw worked. For a long moment, Ethan thought the kid would just shrug and walk away. Then quietly, "'Cause everybody in my life already decided how this ends. Might as well beat 'em to it." And Ethan, who had been fired for kindness, blackballed, left with $400 and a hole in his daughter's shoe, looked at this kid and felt something crack open in his chest, because he knew that armor. He'd worn a version of it. Victoria wore a version of it. It was the exact same wall built by the exact same fear, just in a different neighborhood. "You know what?" Ethan said. "Let me tell you a story about a woman who told me not to come back." He told Andre the whole thing, the SUV, the wallet, getting fired, the 9 days, and then the diner and the job and standing here now. "Point is," Ethan said, "the same lady who threw me away is the reason you're standing in this garage right now, because she was willing to look at the thing she got wrong." People can change, Andre. I've seen it with my own eyes. And the reason I'm telling you is I already decided how your story ends. And it ends with you being the best mechanic on your block and teaching some kid just like you someday. So now there's 2 people who decided. Which one you gonna beat? Andre didn't say anything. But the next morning he showed up 10 minutes early. Hood down. And Ethan didn't make a big thing of it. He just handed him a torque wrench and said, "Come here. I want to show you how to feel a bad bearing before you ever hear it." Word of the pilot spread through the building faster than anyone expected, because the 12 kids who were supposed to drop out didn't drop out. They showed up early. They stayed late. They started competing not for grades, but to be the one Ethan asked to help teach the others. Andre became the unofficial leader of the group, the same kid who'd shown up daring the world to write him off, now staying after hours to tutor a struggling classmate. Because, as he put it, Ethan don't leave people behind, so we don't either. 90 Days in Victoria called Ethan into her office and turned her monitor around. "The pilot group's assessment scores," she said. "Read them." Ethan read, and read again. "These are the highest of any cohort in the company's history, by a significant margin." Victoria's voice was tight with something like awe. "The 12 students every other instructor wanted to cut just posted the best numbers we've ever recorded, and retention, every single one of them re-enrolled for the advanced track. 12 for 12. We have never had 12 for 12, Ethan. Our best cohorts lose 2 or 3. Ethan sat down slowly. "They're good kids. They just needed somebody to see them," Victoria finished. "I know, I was one of the people who didn't." She turned the monitor back. "I want to scale it. Nationally. Every academy, every state. I want your program to be the spine of how this entire company trains people, and I want you to lead the rollout." And here was the first real twist of the new life, the thing Ethan hadn't seen coming, because he'd assumed he'd spend his years quietly teaching 12 kids at a time, and now the woman across the desk was talking about tens of thousands. "Victoria, I'm one guy. I can teach 12. I can't be in 31 states at once." "You won't be." She smiled. "You're going to train the trainers. Every instructor in this company is going to come through you. You're going to teach them the thing you taught Tyler in 90 seconds and the thing you taught Andre, and they're going to carry it to the floors I can't reach." She leaned forward. "You told me once that care can't go on a worksheet, but a person doing it in front of them makes it real. So we're going to make you the person, multiplied by every trainer in the country." Ethan sat with that. It was enormous. It was more than he'd ever imagined for himself. And a small, familiar voice in the back of his head, the voice of a man who'd been kicked enough times to flinch, whispered that things this good don't last, that the floor would tilt again, that he should protect himself. But then he thought about Andre showing up 10 minutes early, and Lily's face when he'd bought her the new shoes, real ones in the store, letting her pick the color, watching her walk in circles around the shoe aisle just to feel them. And he thought about the widow Eleanor Ruiz, and how she'd said, "I'd stopped believing there were men like that." And then there was one. Maybe the point wasn't to protect yourself from the good. Maybe the point was to let it multiply. "Okay," he said, "I'll do it. But I've got one condition." "Name it." "Marcus." Ethan looked at her. "The kid from the old shop. 19 best young hands I ever trained. When Dale's shop goes under, and it's going under, I want to bring him here, not as charity, as one of the first trainers I develop. He's got the thing Victoria. He's already got it. He just needs somebody to point him at it." Victoria was quiet a moment. "You want to rescue the kid from the shop that fired you. I don't think of it as rescuing him. I think of it as not leaving him behind." Ethan shrugged. "Andre said it best. We don't leave people behind." And Victoria Hayes, who had built a wall for 20 years so no one could get close enough to disappoint her, looked at this man who kept insisting on carrying people up with him, and she realized she'd stopped being surprised by it. She'd started expecting it. And expecting good from a person she was slowly learning was its own kind of healing. "Bring the kid," she said. "Bring anyone you want. You've earned that." The Prentice shop closed for good 6 weeks later. Ethan heard about it from Marcus, who called him one evening, and there was a strange mix of things in the kid's voice, sadness, because it had been his first job, and something lighter underneath. "Dale called everybody in this morning," Marcus said. "Told us he couldn't make payroll. Shop's done. He's man Ethan. He looked broken. I almost felt bad for him. Almost." "What did he say to you?" "That's the crazy part." Marcus paused. "He pulled me aside after, and he apologized. To me. Said he should have listened to you about promoting me. Said he did the Hendricks thing called, and apologized like you told him, and they were kind about it, but it was too late, the account was gone. And then he said," Marcus's voice went odd. "He said, 'Tell Carter he was right. Tell him I finally get it, and tell him thank you. For the last free repair.'" Ethan closed his eyes. He was standing in his kitchen, and Lily was doing homework at the table behind him, and he had to take a slow breath. "He said thank you," Ethan repeated. "Yeah, first time I ever heard him say it to anybody." Marcus laughed quietly. "Took losing the whole shop, but he said it." And there was the deeper twist, the one under the surface. Because Ethan had told Dale that free repair to save the shop, and it hadn't saved the shop. The shop was gone. But it had saved something else. It had cracked open a hard man just enough to let 2 words out that Ethan had waited 9 years to hear. "Thank you." And the strangest part was that hearing it didn't feel like winning. It felt like grief and mercy, and something being finally quietly put to rest. "Marcus," Ethan said, "what are you going to do now for work?" "I don't know. Start applying, I guess. It's rough out there, but how'd you feel about coming to work with me?" Silence on the line, then carefully, like he was afraid to hope. "What?" "I'm building something over here, kid. Something big. And I need people who've got the thing you and me have where we don't leave folks behind. I want you on my team, not as a favor, because you earned it, and because I trust you, and because I've watched you become a better mechanic than I was at your age." Ethan smiled. "So, you in?" He heard the kid's breath catch, and when Marcus spoke, his voice was thick. "Ethan, I tried to quit for you. When he fired you, I tried to walk out, and you wouldn't let me. I remember. And now you're... Marcus stopped. Got himself together. Yeah, I'm in. God, yes, I'm in. When do I start? Monday. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty. We start on the floor, same as always. Ethan hung up and turned around, and Lily was watching him from the kitchen table with her chin in her hands. That was Marcus, she said. The one you always talk about. The one you taught. That's the one. He's coming to work with me now. Lily nodded like this was exactly as it should be. Because you don't leave people behind. Ethan stopped. Where'd you hear that? You said it on the phone. And you say it a lot. It's kind of your whole thing, Daddy. She went back to her homework. Andre says it too, in the videos. Ethan went very still. The videos. Lily's eyes went wide, the look of a kid who'd just accidentally revealed something. Lily. What videos? She sighed, got up, came over and took his phone. She tapped a few times and handed it back. And there on the screen was a video. Someone at the academy had filmed Ethan weeks ago, teaching the pilot group filmed him, telling Andre the story about the woman who said, "Don't come back." Filmed him saying, "We don't leave people behind." Filmed the 12 so-called dropouts crowding around an engine with their instructor. It had been posted to the company's internal page, and then someone had shared it. And someone else. And now Ethan's stomach dropped as he saw the number under the video. 2 million views. It's kind of famous, Daddy, Lily said, gently patting his arm the way he patted hers when she was overwhelmed. Grandma's whole church group watched it. They cried. Ethan stared at the number. 2 million people had watched a fired mechanic from the west side of Chicago tell a room full of throwaway kids that somebody had decided how their story ends, and it ends with them mattering. His phone buzzed in his hand. A text from Victoria. Have you seen it? Call me. Everything's about to change. Again. And Ethan Carter stood in his small kitchen holding a phone with 2 million views on it, his daughter's hand on his arm, and understood that the quiet life of teaching 12 kids at a time was already over, that the thing he'd built from the worst week of his life had grown legs and walked out into the world without asking his permission, and there was no calling it back now. He looked down at Lily. Baby, he said slowly. I think your daddy's about to get very, very busy. Lily grinned. Good. You're better when you're busy. You do the real smile more. And Ethan laughed and pulled her in and hit the call button because whatever was coming next, and something big was clearly coming. He wasn't going to face it alone anymore. He had a daughter who kept him honest. A kid named Marcus, starting Monday 12. Former dropouts who'd run through a wall for him, and a woman who'd once told him not to come back now telling him that everything was about to change. He put the phone to his ear. It rang once. Victoria, he said. Tell me what's happening. The video, Victoria said, and Ethan could hear she was walking fast the way she did when something was moving faster than she could. The one of you and Andre. It didn't just go viral inside the company. Someone leaked it to the outside. It's everywhere, Ethan. 2 million yesterday. It's past 6 million this morning. Ethan sat down hard in the kitchen chair. 6. And it's not stopping. But that's not why I called. She took a breath. I got a call 20 minutes ago from the Department of Labor, the federal government, Ethan. They've been trying for years to fix the exact problem you named. 60% of trained tradespeople quitting inside 5 years. It's a national crisis nobody's cracked. And someone in Washington saw your video. And they want to talk about building your program into a national workforce model. Government funded. Every state. Not 11,000 mechanics a year. Hundreds of thousands of workers. Every trade. The phone was very quiet against Ethan's ear. Ethan, are you there? I'm a mechanic, he said finally, and his voice came out smaller than he meant it to. From the west side, 9 months ago, I had $400 and a hole in my kid's shoe. I taught 12 kids in a garage. I don't know how to Victoria. This is the government. This is hundreds of thousands of, I'm not qualified to. Stop. Her voice cut clean through his panic, firm and warm at once. Listen to me. 9 months ago, I told you that you were the best teacher I'd ever seen, and you didn't know it yet. Do you remember what you said to Andre? You told him 2 people had decided how his story ends and asked which one he was going to beat. A pause. Right now, there's a voice in your head that decided how your story ends, that a mechanic from the West Side doesn't belong in a room in Washington. That's the same wall, Ethan, yours. Which one are you going to beat?
Here.
And Ethan Carter, sitting in his small kitchen with his daughter watching him from across the table, felt his own words come back and land square in his chest. He closed his eyes. That's a low blow, using my own speech against me, he said. I learned from the best. He could hear the smile in it. So, what do I tell Washington? Ethan looked across the table at Lily, who was watching him with those serious eyes, and he covered the phone with his hand. Baby, he said, that job I have, they want to make it a whole lot bigger, like help the whole country bigger, and I'm scared I'm not good enough for it. And Lily, 8 years old, chin on her hands, tilted her head, and said the truest thing anyone had said to him in 9 months. Daddy, you're the guy who fixes things nobody else can fix. That's your whole job. That's always been your whole job. She shrugged like it was obvious. So go fix it. Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he took his hand off the phone. Victoria, he said, tell Washington I'll come. The next 8 months moved like a river breaking loose. Ethan flew to Washington for the first time in his life, a man who'd never been on a plane gripping the armrest through takeoff, while Marcus, in the seat beside him now, as his second-in-command, laughed and said, You can rebuild a transmission blindfolded, but a Boeing scares you. And Ethan said, A transmission. I understand. This thing I'm just trusting a stranger. And Marcus went quiet and said, Kinda like the last 9 months, huh? And Ethan had no answer for that because the kid was right. He sat in a federal building across a long table from people with titles he couldn't pronounce, and for the first 10 minutes he felt exactly like he had that first day in the conference room with Gerald the outsider, the fired mechanic, the man who didn't belong. One of the officials, a sharp woman with reading glasses, looked over his file and said not unkindly, but with clear doubt, Mr. Carter, I'll be direct. You have no degree, no formal background in education policy or workforce development. You ran a training pilot for 12 students, and we're discussing a program that could touch hundreds of thousands of American workers. Help me understand why we're having this conversation. And every head of the table turned to him. The same turn, the same test. Ethan had been here before. He didn't get defensive. He set down the folder he'd been handed and folded his scarred hands on the table. You're right, he said. I don't have a degree. I've got about $1,000 of student loans I never finished paying on a semester of community college. I dropped out of when my wife left, and I had a 3-year-old to feed alone. He let that sit. But you've spent, a decade and a lot of money on this problem, and you've got people at this table with every degree there is, and the number's still 60%. 6 out of 10 people you train walk away from the trade. So maybe the question isn't why I'm in the room. Maybe the question is why what you've been trying hasn't worked. And I think I know the answer, and it's not complicated. And it's the reason a video of me talking to a 19-year-old kid got 6 million views. He leaned forward. You've been treating people like they're problems to be trained. And nobody stays anywhere. They're treated like a problem. You want them to stay in the trade. Treat them like they matter. Teach the person, not just the skill. That's it. That's the whole secret. And it doesn't take a degree to know it. It takes having been a person who almost gave up and having somebody see you before you did. The room was silent. The woman with the reading glasses took them off slowly. That kid in the video, she said. Andre, Where is he now? 2 seats down. Ethan gestured, and Andre, 20 now, in a collared shirt he kept tugging at, like it was strangling him, half raised his hand. He's one of my trainers, youngest we've got. He teaches kids exactly like the kid he used to be, and not one of them has dropped out. The woman looked at Andre for a long moment. Then she put her glasses back on, looked down at the file, and Ethan watched her write something and underline it twice. "All right, Mr. Carter," she said. "Show us how you'd build it." They approved the pilot. Not the whole country, not at first 5 states, a 2-year trial, federal funding with Ethan as the lead architect. And the second twist of that Washington meeting, the one Ethan didn't see coming, was that the woman with the reading glasses, Assistant Secretary Diane Whitfield, it turned out, pulled him aside afterward and said quietly, "My father was a welder. 40 years. He used to say the trades were dying because nobody taught young people to be proud of the work anymore, just fast at it. He passed last spring. I wish he could have heard you today." And she shook his hand with both of hers, the way Victoria had, and Ethan understood that everywhere he went, he kept meeting the same person, the child of a tradesman, who'd carried something precious and watched the world stop valuing it. He wasn't building a program. He was giving a whole generation of grieving kids their father's work back. The 5-state pilot launched, and it worked. Because of course it worked. It had worked with 12 kids, and it worked with 12,000. Because the thing at the center of it was true. And true things scale. Retention in the pilot states climbed past 80%, while the national average sat at 40%. Companies started calling Hayes Mobility Group, asking to hire their graduates before they'd even finished. And Ethan, the fired mechanic, found himself training the trainers, who trained the trainers. His fingerprints now on the work of people he'd never meet, in states he'd never visit. And through all of it, he never once stopped teaching on the floor himself. Every Friday, no matter how full his calendar, he put on coveralls and taught a class of the hardest 12 he could find, because he told Victoria, "The day I'm too important to have grease under my nails is the day I stop understanding what I'm building." She'd stopped arguing with him about it months ago. She'd started sitting in on the classes instead, in the back watching, and more than once Danielle caught her wiping her eyes. Then came the letter. It arrived at the office on a Tuesday, and Danielle brought it to Ethan personally because she recognized the return address. It was from a national foundation. One of the big ones, the kind that gave out awards that made the news, and it informed Mr. Ethan Carter that he had been selected to receive their annual award for excellence in American workforce leadership, presented each year to one individual whose work had transformed the lives of working people across the nation. Ethan read it 3 times. Then he set it down and said, "There's been a mistake." "There's no mistake," Danielle said. "This goes to CEOs, senators, people who—" He gestured helplessly. "I fix cars, Danielle." "You used to fix cars," she said gently. "Now you fix lives. Read the second page."
So,
He turned the page, and on it was a list of the people who had written in to nominate him. Eleanor Ruiz, the widow whose car he'd fixed on a Sunday. The single mother whose 15-year-old Honda he'd kept alive for years. Marcus. Andre. Tyler. Gerald, the director who'd once tried to shut him down. Assistant Secretary Whitfield. Dozens of the 12-at-a-time kids from his Friday classes. And at the very bottom, one more name that made his throat close. Dale Prentice. There was a note beside Dale's name. Ethan read it and had to sit down. "This man worked for me for 9 years, and I never once told him thank you. I fired him for being a better person than I knew how to be. It cost me my business, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it finally made me understand what I'd been standing next to for 9 years and never seen. If you give this award to anyone, give it to Ethan Carter. He gave me the last free repair of my life, and it wasn't for my shop. It was for me." Ethan sat with the letter in his hands for a long, long time. "He nominated me," he said finally. "He did. After everything." Danielle put a hand on his shoulder. "People can change, Ethan. You told a kid named Andre that once. Turns out you were right about more people than you knew. The award ceremony was in a grand hotel ballroom, and Ethan Carter, who had never owned a suit until Victoria dragged him to a tailor 2 weeks before and refused to let him see the price, stood backstage in the finest thing he'd ever worn, terrified, holding a folded index card with a speech he'd rewritten 11 times. And in the third row, in a brand new dress she'd picked herself, sat Lily, 9 years old now, her grandmother beside her. And she'd made him promise that morning that he wouldn't do the smile, the fake one, no matter how scared he got, and he'd promised, and she'd made him pinky swear it. Victoria found him backstage. She didn't say anything at first. She just straightened his tie the way a person does for someone they've decided is family, and then she stepped back and looked at him. "You know," she said, "the first time I saw you I told you not to come back." "I remember. I've thought about that a lot. What it would have cost the world if you'd listened." Her eyes were shining. There'd be no program, no Andre, no 5 states about to become 50. Thousands of kids who'd have quit the trade would have quit. All of it hung on a man who got kicked in the teeth, deciding to keep being kind anyway. She swallowed hard. "My father would have loved you, Ethan. I've spent 20 years trying to keep him alive with a company. You did it in 9 months with a folding chair and a torque wrench and a 19-year-old nobody wanted. Thank you for not listening to me when I told you not to come back." Ethan couldn't speak for a second. Then he said, "You didn't tell me not to come back, Victoria. Not really. You told a wall not to come back. The you that's standing here now, that's the person I came back for." And Victoria Hayes, CEO, who had not cried in front of another human being in 2 decades, put her hand over her mouth and turned away and let herself just for a moment before she pulled it together and squeezed his arm and said, "Go. They're calling your name." They were. Ethan Carter walked out onto that stage in front of 1,000 people, and the applause hit him like a wave, and he found Lily's face in the third row immediately, the way he'd found her sleeping face through a 2-inch gap every morning of her life, and she was beaming at him and mouthing something, and he read it on her lips. The real one, Daddy. The real one. So he smiled, the real one, and he set his index card down on the podium and never looked at it once. "I wrote a speech," he said, 11 times. It's right here. And I'm not going to read it because it's full of the words you're supposed to say at a thing like this, and I've never been good at the words you're supposed to say. I'm just going to tell you the truth because the truth is the only thing I've ever really known how to work with. The room went quiet.
James Brazier.
"A little under 2 years ago, I fixed a woman's car and she couldn't pay, so I gave her the keys anyway because her car was fixed and she needed to get home, and that seemed simple to me. And I got fired for it that same afternoon. My boss told me to clean out my toolbox, and a woman told me not to come back, and I drove home to my daughter with $400 to my name and no idea how I was going to make rent." He paused. "And I want to talk to the people in this room, and the people watching this later who are in that truck right now. Who did the right thing and got punished for it? Who worked harder than everybody and got passed over? Who are sitting somewhere tonight thinking that being good is a sucker's game because they've got the scars to prove it?" He gripped the edges of the podium. "I need you to hear me. Because I was you. 9 months before this, I was exactly you." His voice was thick now, and he let it be. "They can fire you for doing the right thing. They can talk about you and shut doors in your face and make you feel like the honest man is the fool. But here's what I know now that I didn't know in that truck. Your integrity is not a sucker's game. It's the one thing they can never take because it's the one thing you never gave them to hold. They can take your job. They cannot take who you are. And if you hold on to who you are, if you keep being the person who gives the free repair, who doesn't leave people behind, who does right when doing right, costs, you then one day, life has a way of opening a door that no boss, no company, no person on this earth can ever close again." So, somewhere in the room, someone was crying openly. Ethan found Lily's face again. "I have a daughter," he said, and his voice cracked, and he let it. "She's 9. She's sitting right there in the blue dress, and she's the one who taught me most of what I just said, because when I was scared to take the job that led me here, she told me I was the guy who fixes things nobody else can fix, so I should go fix it. She measures a man by whether he yells about knocked over trash cans. And every single morning of her life, before I do anything else, I open her door 2 inches and I check that she's safe. Because a long time ago I promised her that no matter how hard life got, she would always feel safe. He had to stop. He breathed. For 11 days after I got fired, I was scared I'd made a liar of myself, that I couldn't keep that promise. And I stand here tonight to tell every parent in this room who's scared right now doing the math 3 times on a shoebox full of bills. You keep your integrity and you keep loving that kid, and you hold on. Because the day I got fired felt like the end of everything, and it turned out to be the beginning of the only life worth living. He looked out at the 1,000 faces. A woman once told me not to come back. Those were the words that were supposed to end me. He smiled, the real one, wide and unguarded. They turned out to be the words that started my whole life. So if somebody's told you not to come back from a job, from a dream, from a door you got shut out of, I'm here to tell you it might just be the best thing that ever happened to you. You just can't see it yet.
Sorry.
He picked his index card back up unread and folded it into his pocket. Skills can build you a career, he said. But integrity builds you a life. Thank you. The room came up out of their seats all at once, 1,000 people standing, and the sound of it filled the ballroom like a flood. But Ethan Carter didn't hear most of it, because he'd already walked down off the stage and straight to the 3rd row, and he'd scooped his 9-year-old daughter up into his arms, the way he had every single day since she was born, and she had her face buried in his neck, and she was saying something only he could hear over and over into his ear. "You did the real one, Daddy. You did the real one the whole time." And Ethan Carter held his daughter in a room full of people applauding a man they'd once have walked right past on the street, a mechanic with grease under his nails and a hole in his heart he'd filled with other people, and he knew finally and completely that he had kept his promise. She was safe. She had always been safe. Because safety was never the money or the title or the award in his free hand. It was a father who never once, not on his worst day, became a man his daughter would have to be ashamed of. Victoria was standing at the end of the row, applauding with tears streaming down a face she no longer bothered to guard. Marcus was beside her, whistling through his fingers, like the kid he still partly was. Andre was on his feet, that boy who'd dared the world to write him off, clapping for the man who'd refused to. And somewhere out in the country, a former shop owner named Dale Prentice was watching a live stream on a laptop in a small apartment, and he was crying too, and he was not ashamed of it. They can fire you for doing the right thing. But if you keep your integrity, life will open a door that no one can ever close. Ethan Carter learned that in the front seat of a rusted pickup truck with $400 and a promise to keep. And he spent the rest of his life holding that door open for everyone the world had ever told not to come back.